Hello. So here we have the distributive property. So what's going to happen here is you're going to be introduced to this idea that sometimes you might be adding inside of your parentheses, sometimes you might be subtracting. So the new concept is to make sure that you are doing this and watching the signs. Okay. So look for if it's positive or negative, or in this case, you could think of it like adding or subtracting. Okay. So you are going to be rewriting this problem here using the distributive property. And somehow we're going to come up with this answer of 91. So we're going to kind of solve along the way. So we end up starting, and on your piece of paper, you can write this down and say, all right, I see the problem. I'm going to even be saying it out loud as I go. 4 plus 9, 4 plus 9. It matches times 7. Got it. Okay. So I'm going to take my knowledge of the distributive property. And something else you might notice that's a little different than some problems you're used to is that we have our parentheses first and then our times 7 after, right? Most problems we've been doing up until now, we've had our kind of 7 times and then we'd have 4 plus 9. So this is almost kind of an example of the commutative property that you can have your 7 times 4 plus 9 over here, or you can not have it here and you can have your 4 plus 9 times 7. Both are accurate, both are the same thing. And you're going to use the distributive property in the same way. So we're going to say, okay, we've got our 7, and we want to distribute that 7, multiply by 7 to everything inside of our parentheses. So we're going to say, okay, well, let's start by doing 7 times 4. So to show my work, I'm going to call this 7 times 4. That's a multiplication symbol. And I'm just going to put it in parentheses so that I know that this is kind of, I've taken my 7 times 4 and it's its own little clump. And then I'm going to say, okay, I've done the 7 times 4. Now I need to do the 7 times 9. 7 times 9. And then I need to say, okay, well, am I going to add these together, subtract them, multiply them, divide them? What am I going to do? And I get that information from this symbol here. This is the symbol I haven't yet used in my problem. So I'm going to drop it on down into my new kind of part of my equation. So then I can continue and say, okay, can anything else be simplified? And as I look, I say, oh, well, 7 times 4, 7, 14, 21. I know that is 28. So I'm no longer going to call this a 7 times 4. I'm now going to call it a 28. And I'm going to say, okay, 7 times 9 can also be simplified, which I know turns into a 63. And I'm not going to longer call this a 7 times 9. I'm going to call it a 63. The symbol I haven't used yet is this addition. So I'm going to drop it on down, and then I can pretend like it's not there. I've used all the parts here, and I've simplified them. So then my last thing I can do is say, oh, well, I can simplify this one step further by just simply adding these two things together. So I can say, well, I know that 60 plus 20 gets me 80, and 8 plus 3 gets me 11. And when I add those together, I get 91, which is, well, bam, what we got up here. But we've used this process of the distributive property to work the problem, to simplify it along the way into its most simplified phrase or term, which is 91. So your job here is to do that same thing for these problems over here, remembering to watch the signs, right? Are you going to be multiplying and adding, or are you going to start with some